G'day, Tragic here. I want to talk about something a little unusual here. I'm going to probably do these videos a little more often. I see a potential for just to chat, basically, about gaming. And I haven't really got a name for this segment. If you could think of a segment, I'm thinking, I call my reviews Tragic Thoughts. So I might call this Tragically Unscripted or something. Whatever. Let's get into this. I want to talk about the LCG. And by extension, the CCG concept of a game that the LCG is based off. Now, this is all coming from the fact that I've only recently found out, because I don't follow LCGs as closely anymore, that Android Netrunner has shut down. Completely shut down. This is an incredibly healthy game that a huge amount of people love, and it's gone. And FFG has actually lost the license. So not only is Netrunner gone, every single other Netrunner product is also gone. We're talking the books, we're talking the board games, we're talking the card games, the miniature card game, I think Infiltration, whatever it's called, gone. No longer being sold instantly. There's no cooling off period. So this is the same thing that happened with Conquest, which was a very, very out of the blue shock because Games Workshop pulled their license. And they were no longer able to release any Games Workshop content. So we lost all the RPGs, we lost Conquest particularly, which was a huge blow to me. I loved Conquest. And we even had Doomtown, which isn't an FFG game, but still, it's basically an LCG. They call it EEG, Endless Expandable Card Game, that's what they call it. Anyway, so that game was also lost the IP, boom, the game disappeared. Now, that's going to be picked up again by the original IP owner, but it started making me think about the LCG as a concept, as an idea for a game. And I have to ask the question, is the LCG viable now? I mean, is it still a viable format for games? So let's have a quick look at it. For starters, let's just assume that you own the IP. Seems to me, if I was at FFG, I'd say our next IP, it has to be in-house. We can't keep going to these other companies. They've got to make their own game, their own IP, like Arkham Horror. They'll never not be able to make Arkham Horror games. So that's a good example of a truly endless card game they can make. Now, I do love these games, I do love them. We've seen Call of Cthulhu, Warhammer, Android Netrunner, Star Wars also got canned just recently, Conquest, Doomtown. All these games have gone in the last few years. And I think one of the things that has really done to the LCG community is shaken the confidence in the concept of LCG. I mean, where is my confidence as a consumer to go, I'm going to buy into Legend of the Five Rings. Now, I love Legend of the Five Rings, the original. I haven't actually played the new one yet. But when you look at Magic the Gathering, you're looking at a game that's got a 30-plus years. And if you buy into that game, you know that there's people to play with. You know the game's going to be live for the next 20. There's no doubt. Your money doesn't disappear. It goes into something that you can play. Now, the core idea of the LCG was to bring the CCG concept of gameplay and card collecting and everything into a cheaper format, which it does do. LCGs are ridiculously cheap compared to CCG, but they're still really expensive. They might be cheaper than CCGs, but they are still super expensive. We're talking thousands of dollars to collect a LCG for a long period of time. So if I buy into Legend of the Five Rings or whatever the new ones, they're going to bring in 2 new ones probably, whatever the new ones they bring in, if I buy into that, what assurance do I have as a consumer to think, well, this game is going to be around long enough for me to actually play it? If I spend $2,000 on Legend of the Five Rings over the next 5 years, I'm going to get a lot of gameplay out of that $2,000. Now, what separates the LCG, the CCG and stuff from normal board games is the way it's played. Now, all games, well, most games, require someone to play against. For example, you might have to play 2 players in a board game. You get Terra Mystica, you need 3 other players at minimum, right? But what's interesting about the LCG and the CCG is that it has this aspect to it called deck construction. It used to be called deck building, but it got stolen by that other game type, so now we call it deck construction, right? And deck construction is the biggest barrier to the longevity of the LCG. This is what holds back the entire collectible card genre at FFG, like that FFG is trying to produce. Look at all these cards I'm flicking through. Say I want to play Netrunner with a mate of mine. He's never played it. I own a pretty decent collection. I stopped collecting Netrunner a while ago, so about half the collection. But if I want to play someone, I have to make a deck. So I've got to spend time making the deck. I've got to make a deck that is functional, so I have to test it. I then have to make a couple of decks, and I can't just go net decking them because all the net decks use a much wider card pool, or they use the same cards, and you've got a proxy, or you can have to pull apart the decks each turn. And it basically means that it's very hard for me just to whip the game out and play it. So I know a lot of people, what they do is they make 10, 15 decks and just leave them always made up and then just play those decks, which is a fair enough way to go. But, $2,000 for 10 decks, not particularly good. So the barrier to play these games is huge, especially once the game dies. As soon as the game dies, unlike all the other games, it's gone. I mean, it is literally gone. The day that I can't go down to my local game store and play Netrunner with random people who make their own decks and bring their own ideas to the table is the day the card game ceases to exist. But I can always bring Terra Mystica down or whatever board game and play that no matter what, because it's already ready to play without all this extra prep. So now I'm looking at the LCGs and I'm thinking, how can it be justifiable to spend that money when there is no guarantee the game is going to exist in a couple of years? You know what I mean? And it's not like it just disappears. Sure, I own it, but you can never really play it, or it's very, very hard to play. Now, obviously, there's online scenes and all that kind of stuff, but I think my point's coming through here. Now, there's other types of games that try to capture the CCG aspect, but have gone very different approaches. I call them solid deck games. So a solid deck game is like Sentinels of the Multiverse, Ashes of Ashalarian, or whatever the hell that's pronounced, Mage Wars. These are games where they're kind of like in Magic the Gathering. People say, oh, Magic the Gathering is the same. But Magic the Gathering is also like these other games for casuals, as in you can buy complete decks. So I have Ashes. I have a pretty decent collection of Ashes. I got like 15 decks or something. They come with characters and a deck, okay? And then you can modify this deck. Same with Mage Wars. You buy individual Mage Knights, right? I keep getting the name mixed up with Mage Knight, but each individual, Mage Wars character comes with their own deck, their own spell book. You can go to Magic the Gathering and buy a bunch of dual decks, which are set complete decks. You can go to Pathfinder and buy like a big box just full of a single game you can just whack on the table, And I know Pathfinder is not quite a CCG, but once you remove the deck construction angle, you open up to a whole bunch of other card games, Thunderstone, whatever. But these games are infinitely replayable. You have 5 years from now, I go, I feel like a game of Mage Knight. I don't have to remember the 5,000 plus card pool. I don't have to build decks. I don't have to go to the website. I just pick up my mages, play with my mates. And after we finish playing, we go, you know what? I really wish this spell was different, or this spell sucks. Just pull out another card, stick another card in, and slowly mod the deck into my own needs. So you retain some of that deck building. And FFG, if you look at FFG understands this because they have been massively affecting the deck building all the way down. It started with Star Wars, which is basically reducing the deck building to picking 10 cards. And this is for this exact reason. Conquest, you had sort of heroes with like attached squads. So if you picked a hero, which is like a Netrunner ID, you would have like another 7 or 8 cards or whatever the hell it was that would always go on your deck. And those cards, of course, you'd synergize with that entire troop, that entire squad, which would predict your deck building. The point was to simplify deck building massively. And I think solid state games that have supplemental additional cards, kind of like Mage Wars, might be the way FFG should go. Because I don't think that the LCG is viable for modern audiences, especially because buying habits have changed so much and board games are so popular. I was just blown away that Star Wars and Netrunner have both been canned. There's strong rumors that Lord of the Rings is going to be canned soon. they've just finished the Saga cycles, but at the same time, they just released the new cycles just started, so I don't know how true that is. And in fact, the Arkham Horror and Lord of the Rings don't have this real problem because of the solo aspect. See, if I'm building decks for other people and stuff, that's not the same as just building decks for me and playing. You know what I mean? Like, say I want to play a game of Arkham Horror, sit down and build a deck. Well, that's nice and fun, and I can just play. If I have to play with my mate, I've got to build like 3 or 4 decks, and it's sort of for next week, and I find it a lot harder to do that than play in solo. Like, the solo games never lose that ability to just pick up and play whenever you want. I play my Lord of the Rings game more than any other card game I've ever owned. And I've owned CCGs from the beginning. Call of Cthulhu, right? I love that game. I own almost an entire CCG set. I own the entire LCG set. I own most of Mythos, which was the original Chaosism card game that turned into Call of Cthulhu at Chaosism Inc. But I never play that game, ever, because no one I know plays it. Because no one I know has the cards. No one I know makes decks. So if I make a deck for someone, I know how to beat that deck. I also know how to run the deck better. And I'm pretty good at the game after all these years. So it's just, the CCG is different than most games. Magic the Gathering, of course, it's so popular and it's got such a longevity that you can go to a store any time in the last 15 years and get people to play with. This problem doesn't exist for Magic the Gathering, but it does for every other type of person attempting an LCG. And that's weird stuff, man. And what makes this so depressing is that the deck construction, for me, is probably the best thing about the CCG format. That's what makes the game so amazing. But it's also the part that's really pulling it away. Now, Caleb, the Lord of the Rings guy, just did a big article on FFG about the state of LCGs in general. Not in the same way I'm doing. I'm talking about the design of the concept of LCGs. He was talking about what they're doing with the LCGs they still have. And he was talking about trying to expand the concept of the saga boxes in Lord of the Rings. And I think that is exactly what they should be doing. They should be following Pathfinder's model. So you have a box, and in that box is a complete game, and it could be a big box with a couple of expansions, and then you have another box and another box and another box. But they need to somehow combine board gaming with these card game concepts so they're complete packages that retain their playability even after the player base disappears. Because LCGs have proven time and time and again that you cannot trust the scene to exist after a while. You know, when Game of Thrones got canned, got picked up again, it was a big shock. When CSC got canned, we knew it was coming, but it was a big shock. But Star Wars gone, you know, Android Netrunner gone, Conquest gone, Doomtown gone. I'm not sure that the LCG is actually viable as a game anymore, and I find it depressing as hell. And I'll see you guys next time.